In the last few years, Ozempic and Mounjaro managed to make millions of people lose massive amounts of weight with seemingly only mild side effects. More than 1 in 8 US adults have tried the drugs, and for the first time in history, the country's obesity rate actually fell. At the end of 2025, the WHO added GLP-1 drugs to its essential medicines list for diabetics and released guidelines on how to use it for obesity. For the first time ever, we have a medication that reliably, quickly, and seemingly safely can make people lose weight, sometimes massive amounts of weight. But as with most things related to nutrition, health, and weight loss, these medications are controversial. There are many aspects to GLP-1s, but we will focus on one today: the potential medical revolution these drugs could mean for obesity. What are the most deadly chronic diseases of our time that over 1 billion people suffer from and that remains largely unsolved and underfunded? It turns out, GLP-1 drugs are the first effective medical treatment for obesity in medical history. The obesity trap. In 2025, more than a half of Europeans were either overweight or obese, plus 1 in 3 children. And in many countries like the US, Mexico, Chile, or Saudi Arabia, the numbers are even worse. Today, this kills almost 4 million people each year, and if trends continue, by 2050, 1 in 3 adults on Earth will be obese. When hearing the word obese, most people think of the extreme ends of the spectrum, but this is not correct. It's not very helpful that the definition of obese is a bit vague because bodies are pretty different. So it can be a BMI of over 30, your waist-to-hip ratio, or a body fat percentage of over 25% for men and over 32% for women. In the end, obese is a medical term that doesn't judge how you look, but if you have an unhealthy amount of body fat. How did we get here? For most of our history, food was scarce, so when our ancestors found a calorie bomb, binging on it was the best of ideas. The more sugar, fat, and salt, the better. Our brains are wired to love these foods, they bring pleasure, enjoyment, and mental release. And then the world changed overnight, and suddenly our modern food environment hijacked our biology. Food is a product now and has become cheap, calorie-dense, and hyper-palatable, which means it's been engineered with addictive levels of sugar, fat, and salt. About half of the products in a US grocery store are ultra-processed, and many are labeled in ways that are deeply misleading. Marketing strategies like value pricing and constant food ads stimulate us to eat more. So, most people overeat regularly, sometimes without even noticing, and this is very subtle. Most people don't get obese because they massively lack self-control, they just eat a little bit too much over a long period of time. Just a small excess, like the equivalent of half a Snickers of your maintenance calories per day, compounds to almost 5 kilograms of fat after a year. This is how most people get obese, slowly, bit by bit. The world is filled with diets and healthy habits campaigns, but if we look at the results, just telling people to eat healthier foods and to move more does very little. Most people gain back most weight they lose during a diet within a year or two, and often gain more afterwards. Really, the only reliable way to do it is a lifestyle change, not a break from calorie-dense food, but a lifestyle where you eat it only occasionally. Which is not just very hard, but also feels like saying no to some of the best things in life. Finally, there's simply hunger, a really strong and hard-to-ignore signal from your body. How hungry you are is genetic, so just through bad luck, you may experience a lot of food noise and think about eating a lot. And to make things worse, in many people who get overweight or obese, their hunger signal becomes dysregulated. Not necessarily permanently, but even after losing weight, it can take a long time before your hunger adjusts downwards again. And this is exactly where GLP-1 drugs interact with our biology. Before we get there, let's fix something easier first: how we engage with the news every day. Our partner Ground News is a website and app built to help you think critically about the information you consume, a mission we fully support. They curate news articles from across the globe, adding context on political bias, reliability, ownership, and summaries that highlight what each side is leaving out. You can even compare headlines to see how bias shapes the narrative. Ground News also reveals blind spots, stories that only one side is covering, showing you what your usual newsfeed is hiding. As information bubbles are becoming the norm, thinking critically about the news is no longer optional, and Ground News makes it easier to do just that. If you'd like to give them a try, go to ground.news/nutshell or scan the QR code on the screen. Using this link gives you 40% off an unlimited access subscription and directly supports our channel. And now, back to losing weight. Your hunger is hormones. Many eating behaviors, eat now or later, chocolate or vegetables, are actually governed by an orchestra of hormones that are not within your control. You're not hungry in the evening because you decide to be or because this is when your body needs energy, but because your body releases certain hormones. And it turns out your fat is one of the major regulators of this orchestra. If you're overweight or obese, the excess fat is throwing your hormonal orchestra out of tune. This may make you more hungry or push you to overeat more, creating insulin resistance that causes type 2 diabetes and so on. But there's one specific hormone that plays its tune quietly in the background, even in obese people. The glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1. It's one of the hormones your body releases after a meal. It tells your pancreas to release more insulin to keep blood sugar in check and slows down your digestion to keep food in your stomach. And in your brain, it increases your feeling of fullness and being satisfied, curbing your appetite. These effects are usually modest. Once in your bloodstream, GLP-1 disappears in barely 2 minutes, its song quickly fading away. So, one day, scientists had an idea. What if we made artificial copies of GLP-1 that play the same song but louder and much longer? The first artificial GLP-1 was approved in 2005 for diabetes and in 2014 for obesity, but the revolution came with semaglutide and tirzepatide. Ozempic and Mounjaro. Really powerful GLP-1 agonists that play their songs in your bloodstream for up to a week. They send out a loud and steady signal that dials down your appetite 24/7. You still enjoy food, but you feel full and satisfied much sooner, making it easy to not overeat. And since the song never really switches off, you feel less hungry throughout your day, making you eat less often. How intensely you feel hunger is largely genetic, so especially people who suffer from food noise, a constant urge to eat, feel a huge psychological relief from the drug. Finally, their bodies stop screaming at them. Suddenly, you're dieting without expending willpower, without really thinking about it. It feels magically effortless. By changing your biology, a drug changed your behavior. But, is this a good thing? Miracle drugs. On the weight loss side, these drugs are incredibly effective. In 3 months, you can lose 10% of your initial weight. 3 months later, over 15, and after a year, you may reach more than 20%. A level of weight loss that used to only really be achievable through bariatric surgery. In other words, GLP-1 drugs make excess weight melt away like nothing before. We can't stress enough at how unhealthy obesity is, causing everything from diabetes to heart attacks and cancer. So, the consequences for health are stunning. Treatment with semaglutide cuts your risk of stroke or heart attack by 20%. 17 months of tirzepatide crashes your chances of developing diabetes by 66%. They also reduce sleep apnea, improve kidney and liver function, lower inflammation, cut cancer risk, and may potentially slow Alzheimer's. They might even boost fertility, as obesity often disrupts hormones and increases complications during pregnancy. And there may be more positive long-term effects. Some of these benefits are a direct result of weight loss, but intriguingly, they sometimes occur regardless of how much weight has been lost. We don't know why yet, but it seems like turning up the GLP-1 signal is synchronizing the whole metabolic orchestra. And, as if that weren't enough, GLP-1 drugs may also quiet other cravings. They seem to reduce the use of alcohol, nicotine, cannabis, and opioids. Large trials are underway to confirm these effects. If the results hold, they could become something unprecedented, real anti-addiction drugs. But, of course, there are side effects. Most commonly, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and constipation. More serious stuff like pancreatitis, kidney problems, or gallbladder disease do happen, but for well under 5% of people. So, it's pretty risky to take these drugs without medical supervision, and in extreme cases, they can land you in the emergency room. While these drugs are not really that new since diabetics have been using them for decades, because now millions of people are using them, we might discover new side effects in the coming years. Apart from this, the main downside of GLP-1 drugs may come from their greatest strength, rapid weight loss. Any steep calorie deficit requires resistance training and plenty of protein, or else you'll lose a lot of muscle along with the fat. That's harmful at any age, but especially after 40, when building muscle gets harder and the risk of falls starts to rise. In the end, the same is true for these drugs as is for any other diet. Without a lifestyle change, you either have to use the drugs forever, or you'll probably gain the weight back. If you use that time to change your eating habits, you have a really good chance of keeping the lost weight off. But here's the real question. What do you think? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're ready for the next adventure, subscribe to Curious Quest. Because every question leads to an adventure.